Welcome, everyone, to the Council of Algorithms. I am the Wizard, and if you're watching this on Twitch or YouTube, thank you for joining me. Feel free to like and subscribe, or don't. That's up to you. Whether you're here because you're interested in philosophy, or artificial intelligence, or psychology, current events, or just simply enjoying asking difficult questions, you've come to the right place. So, this is the first episode in a series called Understanding Ethics. And before we can watch different ethical perspectives debate some of the toughest questions facing society today, we need to answer one very important question. What exactly is ethics? Many people hear the word ethics and immediately think of laws, religion, politics, or simply knowing right from wrong. But ethics is really much deeper than that. Ethics asks one of humanity's oldest questions. How should we live? Every decision we make, from helping a neighbor to designing artificial intelligence, from raising children to making public policy, is built upon some answer to that question. The interesting part, people often agree on the facts, yet arrive at completely different conclusions because they value different things. And that is where ethics begins. Ethics is more than rules. Many people imagine ethics as a rule book. Do this, don't do that. But ethics isn't simply a list of rules. Instead, ethics is the study of how we determine what is right, wrong, good, fair, or just. It's the process of reasoning about difficult decisions. Sometimes those decisions are easy. Helping someone in danger, keeping a promise, being honest. But life rarely gives us only easy decisions. Sometimes every option involves sacrifice. Should a doctor prioritize one patient over another when resources are limited? Should privacy be sacrificed to improve public safety? Should autonomous vehicles protect their passengers or minimize overall harm? Should parents always tell children the complete truth? These aren't simply questions with obvious answers. They're ethical questions because they involve competing values. Ethics is everywhere. One of the biggest misconceptions is that ethics only belongs in philosophy classrooms. Nothing could be further from the truth. Ethics is woven into everyday life. Consider a normal day. Should you tell your coworker an uncomfortable truth? Should you return extra change the cashier accidentally gave you? Should a company collect customer data? Should social media remove misinformation? Should schools allow AI in classrooms? Should governments regulate emerging technology? Every one of these questions involves ethics, even when we don't realize it. Every time that one of us says, "That's unfair," "That wasn't right," "They deserve better," "They should have known," we are making ethical judgments. Ethics isn't the same as law. This is one of the most important distinctions. Something can be legal and still be unethical. History is filled with hundreds of examples. Many forms of discrimination were once perfectly legal. Child labor was legal. Slavery was once legal. Segregation was legal. Legality doesn't automatically determine morality. In fact, the opposite can be true. Sometimes people intentionally break laws because they believe doing so is morally right. Look at the civil rights movement or humanitarian aid to countries that people are restricted from. Acts of civil disobedience. The law asks what is permitted, whereas ethics is asking what is right. Sometimes those answers align, and sometimes they don't. Ethics also isn't the same as personal opinion. People sometimes believe ethics is simply everyone has their own opinion, but ethical reasoning is really much richer than that. Ethics isn't about winning arguments, it's about giving reasons for doing something. Imagine two people disagreeing about free speech. One says people should be allowed to say whatever they want. The other says, well, some speech causes real harm. Both are making ethical arguments, but beneath those arguments are different values. One prioritizes liberty, the other prioritizes protection from harm. And so understanding ethics means learning to recognize those underlying values, not just the conclusions. One of the biggest goals of this series is to help explain something many people struggle with. Why do intelligent, kind, well intentioned people disagree so strongly with another? The answer often isn't because one side is evil and the other is good. It's because they begin with different assumptions about what matters most. Imagine two people witnessing the exact same event. One asks, what freedom was respected? Or was everyone's freedom respected? The other asks, did this event produce the best outcome? A third might ask, what kind of person would do this? A fourth asks, did this strengthen the community? Do you notice something? They're answering different questions. They aren't necessarily disagreeing on facts. They're just evaluating the situation through different ethical lenses. And so ethics helps us reveal hidden assumptions, both about ourselves and about the world around us. This is where ethics becomes incredibly powerful. It teaches us to recognize assumptions we didn't even realize we were making. Suppose someone says, we should always tell the truth. Well, that sounds straightforward, but what about hiding refugees during a war? What about lying to protect someone from an abuser? What about comforting someone during their final hours? Suddenly, the simple rule becomes much more complicated. Ethics forces us to ask, are there exceptions? Why? What values are competing? And that is the beginning of ethical thinking. Not memorizing answers, but learning to ask better questions. You see, ethics is about trade offs. Perhaps the hardest lesson in ethics is this: many ethical dilemmas don't involve choosing between good and evil, they involve choosing between two different goods: freedom versus safety, justice versus mercy, privacy versus security, equality versus individual achievement, innovation versus caution, truth versus compassion, responsibility versus forgiveness. And these are not simple problems because each side represents something genuinely valuable. The difficult work is determining how those values should be balanced. Ethics has always mattered, but in today's world, it matters more than ever. We have artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, climate change, social media, automation, digital privacy, global communication. Technology allows humanity to make decisions on a scale never before possible. The question is no longer simply, what can we do? It's becoming, what should we do? And no technology, not even artificial intelligence, can answer that question by itself. Because ethics isn't simply about information, it's also about values. So, some of the things that we'll explore next for this series are the many different approaches to ethical thinking. Some of these will focus on outcomes, others will focus on duties, and some focus on character or emphasizing compassion, while some might emphasize liberty or justice, relationships, tradition, responsibility, community, evidence. Each of these different frameworks will ask different questions, and each will reveal different strengths about those frameworks. But also remember that each one has limitations. Our goal isn't to declare one of them correct, it's to understand what each contributes to the conversation. Because the more perspectives we understand, the better equipped we become to navigate difficult questions ourselves. So, ethics is not about having all the answers. It's about learning to think more carefully before deciding. It's about recognizing that reasonable people often disagree, not because they care less, but because they begin from different values. And perhaps the greatest lesson ethics teaches us is humility, the willingness to ask, what might I be missing? So, in future episodes, we'll begin exploring the major ethical frameworks that have shaped philosophy, governments, psychology, religion, and modern society for centuries. Until then, pay attention to the conversations around you. The next time you hear someone say, well, that's unfair, that's irresponsible, that's compassionate, or that's my right, ask yourself, what values are underneath those words? Because once you begin seeing ethics, you'll realize it has been shaping the world around you all along. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this introduction and want to explore these ideas further, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next episode in the Understanding Ethics series. And until then, remember, with perspective comes understanding. Thank you.